Hi there, it's Jenna from scribblinggrace.com. Today I'm going to do a Bible Journal with Me tutorial video showing how to create a watercolor wreath. So you of course could do this with acrylics or colored pencils or markers, whatever is your favorite medium. Today I'm going to show you watercolors, and I have a little piece of watercolor paper because I wanted to show you the 5 elements that we're going to work with, and then I'll transfer it into my Bible and we'll start working in there. So to start off, I'm going to use a size 10 paintbrush. I just get these in the packs at the craft store, nothing fancy. I have some water, and I have my Kuretake Gansai Tambi watercolor set. I love this one, and I will put all of the links to all of the supplies to use in the blog post that goes along with this video at scribblinggrace.com/wreath, and I'll put that link in the description below. Okay, so we're gonna go ahead and use just 5 elements to make a wreath, and I'm just gonna pick up some colors. I'm gonna use a red. Let's do like a yellow. This one looks orange, but it turns out kind of yellowy. We'll do like this magenta color, and then I'm gonna pick out 2 greens. Okay. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna start with my flower elements here. So I'm just gonna dip my water or my brush in my water, and I'm just gonna do a rose. So I have a tutorial on how to create a watercolor rose. It's one of my most popular videos and blog posts, and I'll put that link again in that blog post goes along with this video. And in case you need a little more guidance on how to create this rose, but I'll tell you really quickly how I'm going to do it. And I'm going to try to keep all of my elements pretty small because I want them to all fit in my journaling Bible here. So that I want them all to fit, you know, they're going to be kind of tiny. All right, so I have my brush loaded up with a pretty good amount of pigment, and to do this rose I'm just going to do like a little C shape, and then in the middle of that I'm going to do an opposite C shape, or you could say it's a bean shape or whatever you think. And so then I'm going to start overlapping on this first C and create another big C shape, and this time I'm going to start applying some pressure. So as I get to the middle, I apply pressure, and then I release that pressure to get another point at the end. And then I'm going to do the same thing over here. And I'm going to leave a little bit of a gap there. The overlap isn't super duper important, but you do want to overlap at least part of your petals here. Otherwise it'll look a little funky. So the overlap is what's going to give you that rose effect. So now I'm going to just dip my brush really quickly in the water, get a little more of that pigment off because I want it to be dark in the center and lighter as I go out. And I'm just going to do 3 more petals. So I'm going to start right here. I'm going to overlap about halfway or 1/3 of the way from this first petal up here on the top. And I'm going to do the same thing. So I start off applying very little pressure, just the tip of my brush, then I'm applying that pressure to get it nice and wide and thick, and then I'm going to release the pressure so that it's again just the tip of my brush, and then I'm going to just do that again. So you can always go around in a full circle. I kind of tend to switch it up however I feel most comfortable on the way where I start my petals and whatnot. So this time I'm going to start over here, but you definitely could just overlap it. The point is that I want to end or start about 1/3 or 1/4 on this big petal here. So I'm gonna overlap. I'm gonna end up in that point right there. So you could definitely start right there if that makes you more comfortable. I'm gonna go ahead and start on this side just because it's easier for me. And the size brush isn't super duper important. I might actually go a little bit smaller when I move to my Bible, just so I can make sure that I have not too big of roses here. And then I'm just going to do my last one because I feel like this rose might be a little too big, but we'll see here. All right, and that's it. So that's my first element, my rose, and that's going to be my major focal point of my wreath. And now I'm going to go ahead and add some buds. So The buds I'm going to keep in a red color as well, so it kind of seems like it goes with that magenta rose here. Maybe it's the buds of those roses. And these are really easy. I'm just going to do like a little oval shape. Maybe I'll point it at the top. You could just do a full oval, you could do a circle. This really doesn't matter too much. I'm going to go ahead and do groups of 2. So you could definitely curve this all the way. Just do what you feel. This is kind of a impressionist, maybe. We're just having fun here. Okay, so grabbing my yellow now, and this time I want to get this really pigmented. I don't want to have too much water or all of my little dots are going to blend together, and I'll show you what I'm going to do. So for this third element, I'm going to create kind of a, I'm not really sure what to call the shape, but you'll see. So I'm going to start off wide, and I'm just going to use the tip of my brush to create a bunch of dots. Some are going to blend together, and that's okay. And then I'm going to go, I formed a little circle, and then I'm going to go up from that circle in just one area so that it creates this cool little wildflowery shape here. So I'll do it again. So again, it's just a circle of dots, just using that tip of my brush. And then I'm just going to go ahead and I'll do it the opposite way, and I'm just adding a little row going straight up with a slight curve, and then going back down. I just widen it as I get back to that center of the circle, so it creates this interesting shape. And that'll be the third element in my wreath. And now I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to do 2 types of leaves. So my first type of leaf is going to be a bunch of leaves. And so I'm going to go ahead and just draw a straight line, just the tip of my brush, and then I'll go ahead and add maybe 5 leaves. So I just apply the pressure and release that pressure to get that point. And I'll do that again. So I'm applying the pressure and releasing the pressure, and then I do it on the other side. And I'm leaving a little bit of space, white space in the center of my leaves, but that's totally optional. And you can tell that I have a pretty good amount of water in this brush, so the leaves are pretty light. If I wanted my leaves darker, I would just add a little less water and more pigment. And I also want to point out that I forgot to mention, with these 2 elements, my second element and my third element, these are all going to have little sticks that are going to blend with my wreath. So for example, I'm going to go ahead and use brown for the base of my wreath. And so I have some brown here, and like say my wreath is like this, and then I'll just kind of go up once I'm done with that type of thing. So these all will have little branches coming down. Okay, and now I'm going to go ahead and move on to my last element, which is going to be just a double leaf here. So this time I'm going to do kind of a different shape, and we'll go ahead and do the lines first. And then I'm just going to go ahead and do it longer and probably skinnier. But it's the same exact method. It's just applying that pressure, releasing it to get a point, and then doing that again. And if you aren't happy with it, you can always go back and try to fix that shape. You also can always fill in that white space. It's completely up to you. Okay, so those are the 5 elements that I'm going to work with. And now we're going to go ahead and move into the journaling Bible. All right, so I always start off by adding a piece of paper underneath the page to protect the pages below it. I'm using my ESV double column journaling Bible. These are the ones that I keep in stock to hand paint in my Etsy shop. Little plug there. So I'm going to go ahead and start off by outlining my wreath circle here. So I'm going to do a half wreath. You can always, of course, just double it. What I'm doing, you'll just double it if you want to do a full wreath. I'm just going to go ahead and start on over here and just draw a big half circle. I'm going to go slightly over my text here. If that's something that you don't want to do, you definitely could just make it even smaller. And to keep it just in the margins. I've done that before and it works just fine. And I'm just trying to get the line here. I'm erasing it because I don't want to see it very much. And especially once the watercolor is on top, you won't be able to erase your line. So I just mark off somewhat of where I want my wreath to go. And I'm going to go ahead and add my base. Actually, we're going to go ahead and start adding the flowers first. So I'm going to start with my biggest elements, which is my rose. And so I'm going to go ahead and start creating some roses. So one of the things about wreaths is like rules of threes are a really great thing to do. So I'm going to go ahead and add 3 roses, and I'm not going to have them perfectly one atop, one bottom, one in the center. I'm going to try to stagger them just a little bit. So I'll have one up here, one kind of you know, quarter way or a third of the way, and then one maybe down here so that it doesn't look so planned out. You want them to kind of have a little bit of a difference. So I'm going to go ahead and start right here and do that C shape or bean shape. And I'm going to just go ahead and draw my roses. All right, so you can see that I did get these roses much smaller than my original one that I showed you guys first. And so I still use the same exact brush that I used to make this one. I just applied less pressure so that I was able to get it smaller. The more pressure you apply, the thicker the stroke you're gonna get. So I just applied less pressure so that I could control how big my flower got. So now I'm going to move on to my next largest part of my wreath, which is my leaves. So I'm going to start with my biggest set of leaves, the 5 leaf here. And we're going to, again, do a rule of 3. And this time I want my leaves to go along with my wreath. So I'm going to go ahead, start here, do a leaf that we want it to look kind of wild. So we're not going to stay completely perfect, and we're just going to go right outside of this flower here, maybe one right here going inward, and then maybe one this way or one that way. We'll see how we feel. Now I could overlap my rose here, but I want my rose to be the focal point. So I'm going to just end my leaf right next to that rose so that it gives that impression of it being underneath the rose. All right. So at this point, I want to go ahead and start adding my brown so that I can really visualize my wreath shape here. Because at this point, I'm starting to have a harder time to figure that out. The reason why I didn't do this originally was I didn't want the branch, I guess you would say, because I'm going to use brown. I didn't want the branch to be going in the middle of my roses. So this way I can start and stop on the sides of my roses so that it's not overlapping or anything like that. And so I'm just going to go ahead and add this branch of brown around. And we'll start over here. And I'm going to go ahead and do a second branch as well. Questions I get almost all the time is, how do you still read it if you paint over it? And I'm really careful that I only will use watercolors. If I'm going to paint over the text, I use watercolors or materials that pretty much I can always read through. Sometimes my colors will get a little dark, but I have other Bibles that I really read and study from, so I made the decision that I don't personally mind if I go over the text a little bit, but that's a completely personal decision. If you don't want to go over the text, by all means, just scale it down and stay in the margins. But I just wanted to address that. As far as composition, you just kind of want to go places where you feel like it needs to be filled up. I think that this is one thing I can't really teach you. It just kind of takes practice. But if you just think rules of threes, generally keep things in the same areas, or like right here I had this big empty area, so I knew I needed to fill that up with a leaf or some other element. I could have added another flower, things like that, but typically I'm just trying to fill in the areas that I feel like it needs it the most. Okay, and now I'm going to go ahead and start adding my buds here, so these pink buds. Okay, and then while that's sort of drying, I'm going to go ahead and move on to my final element here, which are these little wildflowery things. So this time I still have this empty space, so I think I'm going to do one on this side and one on this side. So though I showed my elements in bunches, which mostly I did, so I have my bunches of 2 here, and my leaves in 2s as well. You can always separate them out. You don't have to keep everything together, so I can always separate, as long as you get the idea. And now I'm going to go ahead and just add the branches of all of these little elements that I just added. And then, because I feel like this spot needs something to fill it out, I'm going to go ahead and go back with this guy, since it would look a little weird to add another leaf. And since I have these guys a little bit separated, it'll look just fine if I have this one separated over here on this side as well. So I'm going to just go ahead and do that. Add this last little bit. So that is my half wreath using just 5 elements. It really is a lot easier than it looks, and I know this video is getting pretty long, but I really wanted it to be as in-depth as it could be to help you learn the best. So I am finishing off by just drying with my embossing heat gun or craft heat gun. And then I'm using my Tombow Funusuke brush pen to do some brush lettering on the verse I'm working on, which I'm working on Matthew 6, 9 through 13, which is the Lord's Prayer. And it says, "Our Father in heaven, hallowed be your name, your kingdom come, your will be done on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our debts, as we also have forgiven our debtors. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil." So I'm just writing out "your will be done" with my Tombow Funusuke brush pen. And again, all of these links to all the supplies I'm using and everything will be in that blog post goes along with this video. And I also have tutorials on how to do this lettering. So I have tutorials on brush pen basics, and then also the bounce lettering that I'm doing particularly today. And I'm just writing out "your will be done," and then using a Uniball Signo gel pen in yellow to help my lettering stand out. So I'm just going on the right side of all of my downstrokes, which is that thick part of my letters, just to help it stand out a little bit. And that's my finished page. Alright, so this is my finished page. And I wanted to show you, since this was a half wreath that I did on my Bible page, I wanted to show you a full wreath as well, using the same exact 5 elements. So when I was doing my Bible page, I talked about doing it in groups of 3s, but when you're doing a bigger wreath, you kind of want to work in 5s or 7. The key is that you really just want to work with odd numbers. Odd numbers seem to be more pleasing to the eye. So you can see I'm still doing the same elements, and I have actually groups of 3 on my roses, but if you count them, I actually did 7 roses. So basically I just kind of upped the ante a little bit. So then with my next element, the sets of leaves here, I did 5 of them around my page. And so when I was composing where I was putting my roses, again, you don't want to be perfect thirds or it'll look a little funky. So these 2 are obviously a little closer together than this one down here, which means I had extra space. So I had one of these groups of leaves going out from each side here, and then one coming from this way. So the 2 leaves kind of meet and they form that wreath shape. So that way I get a full circle. And I had a little bit of gaps in between them, and then I just filled that up with my 3rd largest element, this second set of leaves here. So another thing I want to point out is that you want to be sure that you're doing some on the inside of the wreath and some elements on the outside of the wreath. So your flowers are always going to be the focal point. That's going to be right on your wreath. Then as you're adding leaves and extra elements, those are going to kind of point out, and see I have some of my elements going in and inside the circle, and then some of them are outside of the circle, and that gives you that nice wilderness-y look, I guess. So for my 3rd element with these sets of 2 leaves, I have again 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So again, just 5s and 7s. So then when I moved to my smaller elements, it looked better for me to do 7 instead of 5. So that way it filled up the whole wreath. And again, I did 7 of these orangey yellow elements as well. So you can see that all together, though I don't have a completely set plan, I know that I'm gonna do odd numbers, or at least try to do odd numbers. Sometimes you may feel like if you add another set, maybe you're at 6 and you don't want to add another one, or it might look a little too busy. You can always break the rules, but I think it's just something to think about. It's a little more pleasing to do the odd numbers, and your groups, I usually do groups of 2, but you can always vary up the amount of groups here. So for instance, with my roses, I could have just done 3 groups of 2. I mean, I'm still sticking with the groups of 3, but adding this last little rose here, even though I didn't even do a full rose, it really just adds, it just looks more pleasing to your eye than if I were to have done groups of 2. So that's just something to think about. I think that overall, the hardest part of creating wreaths is the composition, so that's why I tried to talk a bit about that today. And I think it just kind of will take practice, but wreaths are so much fun to do, and of course you can vary them up by, this is just 5 elements. You can use all different kinds of flowers, different leaf shapes, and have fun with it. So I hope that you enjoyed this video and you found it helpful. If you did, please give it a thumbs up and subscribe to my channel if you haven't already. Let me know what you think in the comments below, and be sure to go to that blog post, scribblinggrace.com/wreath, for more information on the supplies I used and things like that. All right, God bless.